Ford knew. They just didn't care. The car is on fire. Not because of a crash. Not because of bad luck. Because the company that built it did the math and decided the fire was cheaper than the fix. They knew people would die. They calculated how many. They assigned a dollar value to each life. And then they built the car anyway. This is not a theory. This is not speculation. This is in Ford's own internal documents. Documents that would be read aloud in courtrooms, printed in newspapers, and taught in universities around the world. But before any of that happened, people were already burning. And the most disturbing part isn't what Ford did. It's how long they got away with it. It's 1968. Detroit is scared. For the first time in American automotive history, small foreign cars, Volkswagen, Toyota, Datsun, are taking real market share from the giants of the industry. Not a little. Enough to matter. Enough to panic. Ford's president, Lee Iacocca, responds with a mandate that will define the next decade of the company and cost lives in ways he never publicly acknowledged. The plan: build a small car, under 2,000 pounds, under $2,000. On dealer lots by 1971. A normal car development cycle takes 43 months. Iacocca gave his engineers 25. 18 months cut from the process. 18 months that might have caught everything that came next. That single compressed timeline is where everything starts to unravel. The Pinto launched fast. It sold well. Over 350,000 units in its first year alone. And hidden inside every single one of them was a problem Ford already knew about. During development, Ford ran standard crash tests. What they found was not standard. The Pinto's fuel tank sat directly behind the rear axle, with only inches of space between it and the rear bumper. In a rear-end collision at speeds as low as 25 miles per hour, the tank would rupture. Fuel would pour out. The filler tube could be torn free on impact, spraying gasoline directly onto anything that could ignite. At highway speed, that's not an accident. That's a death trap. The car could be fully engulfed within seconds. Engineers flagged it immediately. They documented it. They proposed a fix, a reinforced plastic shield around the fuel tank that would prevent a rupture in most collisions. The cost of that shield? Between $5 and $11 per car. $11. That was the difference between a design flaw and a death trap. $11. Ford said no. But Ford didn't just ignore the problem. They didn't misplace the report. They didn't table it for review. They studied it, formally, methodically. And what they produced next would become one of the most infamous documents in American corporate history. What was in that document would eventually shock an entire country. But for years, it stayed hidden. Ford called it the Fatalities and Injuries Analysis, a cost-benefit document. Brutally precise. Ford estimated the Pinto's design would cause approximately 180 burn deaths per year, 180 serious burn injuries, around 2,100 vehicles destroyed, 180 people every year built into the forecast. Then they put a price on each one. Using figures from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, figures the government had developed for its own regulatory purposes, Ford valued a human life at $200,725. A serious burn injury, $67,000. A destroyed vehicle, roughly $700. Total projected cost to society each year, $49.5 million. That was the acceptable loss. $49 million worth of human suffering per year, and Ford considered it manageable. Then they ran the other number, 11 million cars, 1.5 million light trucks. $11 per vehicle to install the fix. Total cost of making the Pinto safe, $137 million. Nearly 3 times the projected cost of the deaths. They knew, and they moved forward anyway. While that document sat in Ford's offices, the company was running commercials, families, road trips, the affordable, dependable American car. The gap between those images and that document was not accidental. It was a strategy. Between 1971 and 1978, reports arrived at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Rear-end collisions, Pintos, fires, deaths being logged, lawsuits being filed. Ford's response was consistent. Settle fast, settle quietly, attach a confidentiality agreement to every payout. Each settlement buried the story a little deeper. But you can only bury something for so long. In 1977, journalist Mark Dowie obtained Ford's internal documents and published an expose in Mother Jones magazine. He titled it Pinto Madness. He printed the numbers, he named the document. He showed the public the exact math Ford had used to weigh their lives against a profit margin. Congressional offices opened their phones. The NHTSA launched a formal investigation. And the silence Ford had spent millions maintaining collapsed in weeks. The lawsuits were building, the headlines were spreading, and somewhere on an Indiana highway, the moment that would change everything was about to happen. August 10th, 1978, Elkhart County, Indiana. 3 young women are driving a 1973 Ford Pinto. Judy Ulrich, 18 years old, her sister Lynn, 16, their cousin Donna, 18. A van strikes their car from behind. The fuel tank ruptures. The car catches fire. Lynn and Donna are trapped inside. They die at the scene. Judy is pulled from the wreckage and dies hours later in hospital. The case does not go to civil court. It goes to criminal court. Ford Motor Company is indicted on 3 counts of reckless homicide. The first time in American history that a major corporation had been criminally prosecuted for a defective product. The trial runs for approximately 10 weeks. Ford's legal team argues the 1973 Pinto met all applicable federal safety standards at manufacture. They challenge the crash test evidence. They raise doubts about the precise cause of the fire. On March 13th, 1980, not guilty. All 3 counts. The 3 young women were gone, and Ford had beaten the most serious charge ever brought against an American automaker. But the civil courts are a different story entirely. The case that broke Ford's public image had already been decided years earlier. May 28, 1972. Interstate 15, California. 13-year-old Richard Grimshaw is a passenger in a Ford Pinto driven by a woman named Lily Gray. The car stalls in the middle lane of the freeway. A 1962 Ford Galaxy strikes it from behind. The fuel tank ruptures. The car catches fire. The interior is engulfed in flames. Lily Gray dies of her burns within days. Richard Grimshaw survives, with severe, permanently disfiguring burns across his face and entire body. He was 13 years old. His case goes to trial. The jury is shown everything: the crash test, the cost-benefit document, the $11 fix, the decision not to act. They award Richard Grimshaw $2,516,000 in compensatory damages. Then they deliberate on punitive damages, $125 million. At the time, no jury in American history had ever awarded more in a product liability case. The message was impossible to ignore. A judge later reduces the punitive figure to $3.5 million. But But that message cannot be reduced, cannot be appealed, cannot be quietly settled away. You cannot put a price on a human life, show that math to a jury, and walk away clean. Ford recalled 1.5 million Pintos in June 1978. The plastic shield the fix engineers had identified before the car ever launched was finally installed. Cost of the recall, approximately $20 million. $20 million. Less than the fix would have cost before the first Pinto ever left the factory. Far less than the total legal damage already absorbed. And nowhere near enough to undo what had happened to the people inside those cars. The Pinto didn't just end a product line, it changed the law. The use of internal cost-benefit analysis to weigh projected deaths against financial savings, a practice that had existed across multiple industries, was now a public scandal. Juries had seen it. Regulators had studied it. The country had read about it. The NHTSA tightened rear impact fuel system safety standards. Product liability law evolved to give plaintiffs greater access to internal corporate documents. Business schools and law schools built ethics curricula around what Ford had done, not around the engineering failure. The engineers had done their jobs. They found the problem. They proposed the fix. The failure happened in the boardroom. Ford discontinued the Pinto in 1980. Lee Iacocca had already left the company, moving to Chrysler, where he became one of the most celebrated executives in American business history. The car was gone, the commercials were gone, but the document remained. It still remains, still taught, still cited, still used to show what happens when a corporation stops seeing its customers as people and starts seeing them as variables in an equation. And every year in classrooms around the world, a new generation reads Ford's math for the first time and comes to the same conclusion. Ford ran the numbers. They weighed the fire against the fix. The math said, let it burn. So they did. For a while it worked. Then the documents surfaced. The courtrooms filled. The verdicts came. The Pinto didn't fail because nobody saw it coming. Someone saw it. Someone wrote it down. Someone signed off. The people who paid for that decision weren't in the boardroom. They were on the highway. This wasn't a defect. It was a choice. And choices have consequences. Just not always the ones that were calculated. If you like our content, please subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you next time on Torque City.